Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horn, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horn, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. I am absolutely delighted to have in our virtual studio today, Alden Mills. And as you get to know Alden during our podcast, I know you will find him to be as fascinating as I do. But not only that, he's a person that will make an impact on you and contribute to the differences that you're making. So let me just talk a little bit about Alden Mills, Inc. 500 CEO of Perfect Fitness. And I hope he shares the story of Perfect Fitness in a little bit of detail with our audience. It's a great story. Alden has been awarded over 40 patents worldwide and is the founder of multiple businesses, a 3-time Navy SEAL platoon commander and a Division I athlete, the best-selling author of Be Unstoppable and Unstoppable Teams, recognized as #1 top virtual speaker by Entrepreneur Magazine, and he is an advisor to chief-level executives and board members. Alden, welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. Can you say a few words about yourself to our audience?
First of all, Mike, it's great to be here. I love your podcast. I love what it stands for. And, let's under-promise and over-deliver, shall we? Because I tell you, I appreciate you talking about all my successes, but, oh man, have I struggled a lot. And I really think that's where authentic change comes from, is facing that friction and going all in on it. Things that listeners wouldn't know would be I was diagnosed at a young age with asthma and smaller than normal sized lungs. I was terrible at ball sports, found a passion for sitting on my butt going backwards, rowing. That took me to the Naval Academy, struggled mightily there, but was able to secure a spot in SEAL training and almost got medically dropped from SEAL training, but then went on to have a great career there. And each step along the way, I can really track every success coming after lots of great obstacles in front of me. And I hope when people go through this conversation with us today, that in some small way, we can help them make a change on looking at an obstacle as an opportunity. Because that's where it really is.
And Alden, so this is not a one and done event for you. I mean, given all of your accomplishments, and yet, I guess the successes, they come after the failures, and I'm going to understand those then as at least more than one failure that led to an accomplishment. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's see. The first book, I couldn't get anybody to even want to publish it until I found a buddy who's like, I'll do it as a favor. The second book, I knocked on 38 publisher doors before the 39th one said yes, and got a big 6-figure advance. But it's about persisting and believing in what you're doing.
Hey, let's talk about that, Alden, because in your work as in leadership, as a speaker, as a trainer for others, you talk about the notion of persistency. And can you unbundle that? I mean, what does it? what does persistency mean? I think I understand what it means to be persistent, I think. Well, what's the concept of persistency?
The challenge is being able to find a reason to believe. I use this metaphor that we are all captains of our own ships, captains of our own boats. And when we're going out to make a change, I make the parallel of a captain setting course, leaving the harbor of familiarity, and going across some safe waters, leaving sight of land, and now going across the horizon to a new destination. That's our change. And if anybody has ever been at sea, they know the difference between losing sight of land and being within sight of land. Because once you're outside sight of land, now we're having some internal dialogue that's pretty intense. And that internal dialogue is about battling the demons of doubt, the uncertainty of the situation, the risks that are involved, asking ourselves, is this worth it or not? And the persistency that we're after is the resolve of further building our reason to believe on why this is a course worth pursuing and that I can do it. And the old adage, you got to see to believe, is inaccurate.
Mm.
It's the inverse. We got to believe before we can see. And so when you start thinking about persistency, this isn't about just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's about constantly evaluating and looking at new ways to do something and trying with full vigor. It isn't just going through the motions. And that's what we're after. You know, when I talk to people, my greatest joy is helping people be unstoppable. There are people out there that are unbelievably talented. And yet, for whatever reason, they just haven't found it in their soul to go push beyond that horizon, to activate their full potential. And that's what I get a charge out of.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to step into is how do we help people to give them a reason to believe in themselves, to step into their potential? In my coaching work, that's a lot of what it is helping people to step into their potential, to take a few steps that power them on their pathway. How do you do that, Alden?
So there's two basic fears we grapple with. The fear of staying put and the fear of moving forward. And until the fear of staying put is greater than the fear of moving forward, we're going to stay put.
Yeah.
We like the comfort zone, right? You know, the old adage, pleasure versus pain, and let's avoid the pain and stay with the pleasure. When we talk about doing authentic change, what we're talking about is actually pursuing the pain. So how do you make the pain feel good? Right? How do you do the jujitsu on the pain and look at it? And jujitsu is just a martial art term.
For sure.
Judo. But how do we turn that on itself and turn it into fuel to go, hey, that's uncomfortable, but that's great for me because that means I'm going to grow and it's going to change my direction. And until we can get people to do that, then they will most likely find themselves doing something again and again and again and getting the same result.
Right.
And that's what we want to avoid. Right?
Yeah. In some ways, we build this, what one of my teachers used to call our immunity to change, that our successes prevent us from, considering what's next.
Yeah. And, even in the case of change, everything is constantly changing, right? Today's world is all about, do you have an innovative organization? Are you innovative? What kind of innovations are you bringing forth? Innovation is just a longer word for the word change.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we're talking about here. So let's help you innovate more. Let's think about change as a way of a continual improvement process. An improvement process that we know if we keep embracing will have dramatic impact over time. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, maybe not even over a month. But if we stay the course, then we'll find ourselves in a much different and not just a different place, but we can associate happiness with the process of persisting, finding the joy in getting up and saying, I'm going to do something different today. Today is going to be different.
Yes, it's certainly a different concept. I mean, I think some believe that the effectiveness of coaching is about eliminating a little bit of suffering.
Mhm.
I tend to think about it differently, and that is, how do you push towards happiness? And isn't that what, in some ways, authenticity is all about? It's about finding some congruency
Yeah,
between what you think.
congruency. Oh, I love that word.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of my leadership coaching talks about congruency. You sparked a thought for me. We had this character in first phase of SEAL training
Uh huh.
who had his left butt cheek blown up by a rocket propelled grenade in Vietnam. We called him Instructor Half Butt, right? Walked around with a deep Southern styled accent. And he would ask us all the time, are you going to focus on the pain of training? Or are you going to focus on the pleasure that training can provide you? And then he'd go on and say, now I know for a fact, over 80% of you, you're going to focus on the pain. You know why? Because you all want to be a SEAL on a sunny day. And his point was people are showing up like, oh, they like the idea of being a Navy SEAL. Take the word SEAL out of this equation. They like the idea of being an entrepreneur. They like the idea of being the top salesperson. They like the idea of being an inventor. Great. But it's the work behind that that they really have to embrace.
Yeah. And what's so great about your work, Alden Mills, is that I don't think it's all about heroic accomplishment. I mean, you talk about being a swim buddy to others,
Correct.
and not seeing it sort of as, I mean, it extends beyond belief in yourself, right?
Without question. And
And how do we
it is.
how do we get that helping attitude across?
Wow, that's a big question, Mike. How do you get that across to uh, folks that are probably dealing with one of three major milestones in embracing change? And one of the reasons I was so excited to have this conversation is, I think we're very simpatico on what we're talking about here, because getting people to embrace change means they have to first have gone through one of three steps. The first step, starting, the actual belief that this is worth trying,
Mhm.
right? Then we do the start phase, and then that weaves out a lot of people, right? I mean, how many people have I run into have said, "Oh, I would have invented the perfect push-up. I had that idea, but they never did anything with it," right? Or I was going to go try out
It's
for that.
ingenious, really. It's just ingenious that perfect push up and
Yeah,
what you were able to accomplish with that business. I'm sorry for the interruption. So,
yeah, no problem. But don't forget, there was a whole team of us
of
behind.
course, right? Yeah, that's where we're headed.
Yeah. So, but you have that phase, right? Whereas like, I think I can do that, but okay, then try. You got to start. That's the first big milestone. That weaves out a lot of people when you're looking at change. Then the next one is you're now on your change course, right? We're gonna do this change. We're changing jobs. We're gonna be a parent. We're going to lead a charity group. We're gonna make a change in our community, whatever. And then we run across, I'm going back to my ship metaphor, some rough seas. The wind, the waves, the currents, they all seem to be wanting to push us into the rocks. That example is we're failing. We've failed a couple of times. We've encountered more resistance than we thought. It's harder than we originally thought. It was going along fine in the very beginning, and now we're in that second phase. And that becomes a real challenge. Like, okay, can I gut through these first couple of failures? Is this really worth it? We have a big gut check with ourselves when we start running into the first couple of failures, and it's not fun, quote unquote, anymore. And then we get through that. Now we're in for the final piece, the long slog, the darkest before dawn mentality, where, oh my gosh, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like I'm running out of steam. How many times have you heard the story, whether it's an inventor, someone on a sports team, pick anything, where they gave up just before they had the success? It was right there. And so you have these three major milestones. Now, I appreciate I'm talking at a relatively high level, but I think when we're talking about reaching out to other people, we have to meet them and talk to them depending on where they are in one of those three main cycles of change.
Yeah, I agree. In my work with executives and their teams, I often talk about, if you want to create change, it has to be greater than the amount of resistance that you're going to feel. And if you're at sea, I mean, so many types of resistance arise towards a smooth course. But accompanying that has to be some sort of vision. You got to have an idea of something that is bigger than yourself, that you're willing to share. And you've also got to be somewhat dissatisfied with the current state of things.
Without question.
And with all of that, you got some vision, you got some dissatisfaction, you got to be willing to take a first step. You got to create that movement in order to begin a change process. And I'm wondering for you, Alden, if in your experiences, I think about, back to your introduction, asthma, was it a dissatisfaction that's been the motivator for these incredible successes and failures, or what's in addition to the first steps we took? Because I know we know that you took some first steps given your records of achievement.
Yeah. So I would think the fuel is, I haven't really thought about the fuel of each of those, with one exception. The driving force for everything I've gone after, the driving emotion is love.
Mm-hmm.
There is a love for the water that I had. There was a love for small team dynamics. There was a love for using fitness to help me overcome asthma. And we had this mantra of take control of your body, take control of your life. There's a love for receiving feedback from others saying, hey, you've helped. That helped me. And a love for then knowing that if I help them, that means they're going to go help others. So there's a force multiplying effect. There's this wonderful book out there called Conscious Leadership, and they draw this horizontal line and they talk about above and the below the line leading. They make it really simple. Above the line is love, below the line is fear. If you really think about emotions, all emotions are just derivatives of one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to thinking about change, there have absolutely been times I've been dissatisfied, right? If dissatisfaction is great enough, then I will take action. There's lots of things I'm dissatisfied enough, but it's just not dissatisfied enough.
Sure. Yes.
Right. But eventually what I get to is creating and envisioning a future state that I want to star in that movie. Yeah. Right. I create these movies in my head. I call them outcome movies. And a lot of times, like when I was thinking of quitting in SEAL training, yes, I thought of quitting in SEAL training. Some SEALs will say they never thought of that. Well, good for them, but I did. And when I think about that, I would think about the negative outcome. What's it going to feel like to tell my unborn children someday when I hope to be a dad saying, hey, don't do what dad did and quit? What's it going to be like to have some people tell me, I knew you'd quit. I knew you'd never make it. Can't believe you even tried. And like, oh, I don't want to star in that movie. And sometimes the negative of that can be very powerful in pushing yourself forward.
Sure. And let's talk about unstoppable and unstoppable teams,
Mhm.
because I think you have a point of view that we're all born to be unstoppable.
Correct.
Um, and being unstoppable, though, is a choice that we make.
Correct.
And
It isn't a choice we make once. We make it several times a day, sometimes
right.
many times in a minute.
So, what are the factors we have to consider in making those choices? Is it about our decision making? Is it about the actions we're taking? Is it about how we're interacting with others? What, what contributes to this?
I first think it comes down to asking yourself honestly, authentically, what do you want?
Yeah.
If you think for a moment, and let's just play the game, hey, you got this one life. Just play with me for a moment. If it's just this one life and we don't know when it's going to end, what are you going to do with it? What do you want to do with it? What do you get joy out of? What do you get so much overwhelming joy out of that you'd be like, oh, I could do that for the rest of my life. I love that. Even if the rest of your life could mean just for a little while until you're like, yeah, that was fun. Now I want to do something else. And I think a lot of people forget to dream. They sometimes get caught up in the societal pressures of, well, it's time to go to work. And 40 years later, I'm ready to retire and go play golf. I'm not knocking that approach, but let's go do something we're really passionate about, something that makes our heart sing. And typically, what I have found with those that have gone through a couple of cycles of achieving something, the first achievements, the first changes are ego based. Yeah, I want to get the award. I want to be considered the best. And then after a while, don't need any more awards on my trophy shelf. Those aren't as exciting to me. And then they start moving on the continuum from selfishness, which is a normal thing. I'm there too, to selflessness. And as they go through that process, they start going, wow, how fun was that to serve? How fun was that to give back? How fun was that to help someone go beyond what they originally thought was possible? And I think as you start that approach, the initial ideas of choosing to be unstoppable are selfish. I want X, achieve Y. And then over time, you've done that. The cascading series of successes takes you to a higher level of, okay, well, now, how can I help more people? And I suspect you've been on that path yourself.
Well, and how we really think about creating authentic leaders. And, I often talk about bring more of who you are to what you do.
Right.
And, when I ask my audiences, are you able to be more authentic at home or at work? The answer is always predictable, right? More of myself at home. And for me, it's always about, well, what are we leaving on the table, right? What are you leaving on the table? What's at stake here? What are some of the, what's the shift that you need to make? The tools and the action. And isn't unstoppable leadership really that methodology for helping people to become more congruent in their thoughts, words, and actions, and more authentic leaders? Isn't that what it means to be unstoppable in some ways? Maybe as somebody says that there are only two things to this leadership business. It's that you have to care about something and you have to do something about your care.
So you've thrown a lot there. I think
Well, that's because of you, Alden. You've got a lot of great ideas.
I'm with you on everything. So I want to formulate a
Yeah.
couple of thoughts there because I want to address several of those. Unstoppable leadership. What does that mean? Unstoppable leadership in me is about three concentric circles that grow upon each other. First, how you lead yourself. How you lead yourself becomes a blueprint of how you lead teams. Teams are nothing more than a reflection of their leader. And then those teams and those actions become the culture of the organization. Culture is the largest circle. I often give the metaphor of dropping a pebble in a smooth, dead calm pond and how it ripples out. The pebble is your action, and your first ripple of influence is how you lead yourself, which then builds upon the teams, which then build upon the culture. So it's yourself, teams, culture. How you help people be unstoppable at leading is the word you brought up earlier, congruency. When I do my executive coaching, the first thing, and if they're listening today, they'll be like, I know what he's going to do. It's going to be physical, personal, professional. I always talk about going around their world. If they don't have their health, it doesn't matter what kind of a leader you are. We've always got to have one focus on our health. And when you have a focus on your health, that means you're going to start having the focus on your team's health. And I'm literally meaning the physical health. I asked them how they see. And C is the acronym of sleep, eat, and exercise in that order. I then asked them about what's going on personally. I want to understand what their leading is like at home. Why is that? Exactly the same reason you brought up. Most of the time, they're more authentic at home than they are at work. The home is the perfect leadership practicing place to learn how to be more authentic and bring your authentic self to work. In the end, you want that congruency between aspirational and actual, whether it is your core values of your business or the core values of you. You want to close that gap. And that gap of congruency is the head, the heart, and the gut, right? That's how we lead ourselves individually, is the congruency of what we think, our head, our heart, our emotions, and our gut, our desires. If everybody knows that's Mike, he's the same Mike when he's at his home and at a barbecue as he is in the middle of the throes of our biggest strategic challenge. Why? Because he is focused on what he cares about. And what he cares about is showing how much he cares, which brings me to your final point. And it's how I start unstoppable teams. One of my all-time favorite quotations, Teddy Roosevelt. And I think he said it something like this: no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's a leader's job. A leader's job is to first build trust. To build trust, and you need that trust because you brought up vision earlier, that vision is the connective tissue that will bring people into the fold. And some people will be like, no, I don't want to go to that island across the sea. I want to stay right here. I'm like, okay, well then this isn't for everybody. Okay, then you can get off on the pier, but we're going to in harm's way because it's better for us. It's a better place for us. And when you get to that point, that's where we start building congruency.
It does seem that trust is the foundation for all expression of authentic leadership. And one of the questions that I always have is about scaling, trust in relationships. And given your managerial experience or leadership experience, it's one thing thinking about developing trust with that Navy SEAL swim buddy, or developing trust in a group of three for the power of innovation or change. But how about as you scale? How do we communicate those concepts of trust?
Abraham Lincoln, my other favorite quotation, would say, to win a person to your cause, you must first reach their heart, the great high road to their reason. As a leader who is trying to scale from a swim buddy, that's one person,
sure,
1,000 to 10,000, the leader must never lose sight of what it means to reach their heart. And there are lots of different ways to reach their heart. You can do what some have done, like every day I'm going to commit to writing 5 notes to people.
Mhm.
I'm going to every time get up on when I'm talking to the company or I'm talking in email form, I'm always making sure that they understand who I am and what I stand for. And I'm being very consistent about that. There isn't a switch where one day you walk in and the next day you're like, okay, I've just activated 1,000 people. They all trust me now. Lots of people have been burned. They have varying degrees of trustworthiness that they're willing to accept of that.
Absolutely.
And so the leader's first job is to take a fair amount of time to get the care flywheel. And I think of care as a loop. I've broken it into 4 actions in my book, Unstoppable Teams: connect, achieve, respect, empower. And you have to get that flywheel up and running. And that means you, Mr. or Mrs. Leader, must be the consistent action taker of showing how much you care. Now, it doesn't mean you got to go around and coddle them. Some of the greatest care I've ever had was the hardest care I've ever received, which was going through SEAL training or going through advanced training. The care they showed us was wildly intense and at times painful, but they're like, look, if we don't do this for you, if we're not tough enough on you, you're not going to be able to come back alive.
Right. And
And
that creates quite an
you
impression.
have to be very specific when we're talking about care. But if people will start to see that and the understanding, I'm not talking about running around being a jerk or disrespectful. Those aren't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about caring about why you're doing what you're doing, helping them with the context, and always showing you have their back.
And do you think it was those ingredients that led to Perfect Fitness, $95 million in sales in just 3 years? Was that the ideal behind it from a leadership perspective?
It was absolutely the idea behind it.
Yeah.
I created something called the Perfect Promise. It was a 1-page manifesto, and it was all about what we stand for and why this business is in business. Everyone thought, oh, yeah, it's an infomercial company, a one-trick pony. Infomercial was just one way to get out the word of that. That's not how we originally started, and it wasn't how we end today. I mean, the company is still going strong, and we're not using any infomercials. It was about encouraging and meeting people where they were in their fitness journey so they could get enough confidence to take control of their body, which I believe if you can take control of your body, you will have the confidence to take control of other things in your life because it's still the same methodologies.
Yeah. So interesting, Alden, because, again, and I think, maybe we're 2 individuals coming from, different worlds in some ways, but this is what we talk about, meeting people where they are. I mean, the concepts for leadership, at least in the way that we're talking about it are universal. I mean,
Yeah.
ideas around trust and being aware of who you are and how you relate to others and congruence.
I totally agree with you, Mike. And the big challenge is you and I, we can talk until we're blue in the face.
Yeah.
We can give the simplest methodologies, frameworks, tools. But at the end of the day, someone's got to make the decision to try.
Yeah.
And they got to try again and again
Okay.
and again. And, I often would have people when I was running Perfect Fitness say, hey, I used your product for a week and I don't look like the guy in the infomercial. And I'm like, well, when's the last time you did a push-up? Like, well, I hadn't done push-ups for 25 years. I'm 100 pounds overweight. I'm like, well, how long do you think it took you to get 100 pounds overweight? Oh, 25 years. Well, why do you think in just 7 days, which we would never promise something
Sure, right.
like if that's what you want to do, then you've got to commit to the fact and have the context of understanding hey, it took me a long time to get to this place of dissatisfaction. It's going to take me a while to get out of it.
Right. And this is why it's been so wonderful to have you as a guest, Alden Mills, on Authentic Change podcast today. I mean, relating your experiences and failing and succeeding and learning to lead yourself, and using your platforms that you've had in business and in as an inventor. I mean, bringing all of that to bear on other success and helping others to achieve and step into their greatness along with their teams, to make them, in your words, unstoppable. Or in the second book, an unstoppable team. We don't have enough of that in the world, and it makes me so grateful, Alden Mills, that you're promoting this work, that you're bringing this into the world and leveraging your experiences so that others can succeed.
Well, Mike, thank you. And it's a joy to team up with someone like you, who I view as a swim buddy, who's on a similar course to helping people leave that safe harbor of familiarity and go after those dreams.
Yes, and I'd encourage all of our listeners to purchase Unstoppable Teams, to engage with Alden at alden-mills.com. So ALDEN-MILLS.com, alden-mills.com, to engage with Alden there, to investigate him as a speaker, as an educator, as a leader. And Alden, again, thank you so much for being a guest on the Authentic Change podcast. I'll leave the last word to you.
And remember, unstoppable is a choice.
Unstoppable is a choice. And once again, until the next episode of the Authentic Change podcast, stay well. Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership, and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horn.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horn.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast.